I'm a big fan of Continental's Grand Prix four-season tires. Unfortunately, Continental doesn't make a tubeless cyclocross tire, which is something I prefer during the winter because of the added traction from the knobbier tread, the lower air pressure, as well as the improved puncture resistance. So instead, this winter I'm switching over to Panaracer's popular Gravelking SK tire at 38 millimeters wide for a bit more traction. As I do so, I'll walk you through the process, so stay tuned. The first thing you'll want to do is release all of the air from your inner tube. Next, you'll unscrew the valve's lock nut and then squeeze the tire with your hand, which breaks the seal between the bead and the rim. Do this all the way around both sides. You'll then wedge one tire iron underneath the bead, pull down, and lock everything into place on the spoke. Do the same with a second tire iron a couple of spokes down, and repeat the process until the bead fully breaks free. Once this happens, you can skim the iron along the outside edge of the rim, which will fully expose the bead on one side and allow you to pull out the inner tube and extract the valve. Finally, depending on the tire, you might be able to remove the other bead by hand. Alright, with the tire and the inner tube now out of the way, we can see the rim tape in place here. Just like any other piece of tape, it's meant to stick to things, in this instance to the rim between each sidewall. It also covers all of the spoke holes to further promote an airtight seal. Since DT Swiss has already put this tape in place, we won't have to purchase anything aftermarket from our local bike shop. Now, you'll notice that DT Swiss indicates that these are tubeless ready rims. We'll write an in-depth article about this topic coming up here pretty soon. But for now, just keep in mind this simply means that each of the tire's sidewalls are slightly higher than a typical rim design. They also feature a kind of a hooked or a shouldered design that further helps the tire's bead seat against the rim without the tube in place. Rim tape is designed to cover spoke holes. However, we're still going to have a large hole in our rim where the valve goes. Obviously, since valves are attached to inner tubes and we're getting rid of our inner tube, this creates a problem that's easily solved with an aftermarket valve like this one from Stan's No Tube. We can see at this end it features a rubber gasket that will create a tight seal once it's in place. Let's see how it works. Adding the valve is a pretty straightforward process. You'll first remove the end cap, then remove the lock nut, put it into the rim in place, put the lock nut back in place, and then screw on the cap. With the valve in place, let's quickly discuss rolling direction.
Now, some bike tires are directional, which means that they have to turn in a specific direction. The Gravelking SKs are not directional. In other words, there's no arrow indication on the sidewall, and if you take a closer look at the tread pattern, you'll see that it's actually identical in both directions. I did double check on the Panaracer website and confirmed this.
Start by putting one bead into place by hand. Then you'll put the other in place, although you'll likely have to use a tire iron for the last third or so due to the tension buildup between the bead and the rim. Eventually, though, the tension is going to become so great that the iron won't be able to skim between the tire and the rim. So to help things move along, I typically add a dab of Aquaphor underneath the bead, but just about any slick rubber-safe substance should work. This will make skimming everything into place much easier. With the tire on and the valve in place, it's now time to add sealant, which helps quickly close tears and punctures as they occurred. There are tons of different brands out there, but my preferred formula is from Orange Seal. I've used them for years and they've never left me with a flat. It also comes with a nifty twist lock injection system that allows you to quickly and easily add sealant, whether during the initial setup like this or when topping off later in the season. First, a valve core remover opens up sufficient space inside the valve to allow the sealant through. Next, I'll remove the stock cap on the sealant bottle, replace it with the twist lock system, shake vigorously for a few seconds, attach the tube to the valve, and squeeze 3 to 4 ounces into the tire by hand. With sealant in the tire, it's now time to introduce some air pressure, and as the tire inflates, its bead will seat with the rim's sidewall, and you'll probably hear some popping. This pressure also forces sealant into any leaks, just like it's supposed to, and causes it to bubble. If necessary, you can detach the pump head from the valve and roll the sealant around to concentrate it in these areas. Next, I'll gently bounce the tire on the ground while rotating it, which will help further get the sealant where it needs to go. Afterward, I'll lay the rim flat on its side and leave it in place for at least 30 minutes while everything sets up. And now the rear tire is all set. Now, I've set up my fair share of tubeless tires over the years, and this rear Gravelking was the first model that actually allowed me to seat the bead to the rim using a floor pump versus a high pressure blast of air from a compressor, which is something I attempted only because I was having difficulty with the DIY Presta compatible head I had attached to my compressor. But if I've learned anything, it's that the mounting process can be very different from tubeless tire to tubeless tire, even between the same brand and model. In other words, I wasn't nearly as lucky with the front tire. In fact, it was only after re-removing the tire and valve and making a huge mess in the process, attempting to loosen the bead with hot air from a blow dryer, and then reinstalling the inner tube and tire to stretch everything out, also unsuccessful, that I learned my rim actually needed a complete retensioning. So I dropped it off at my local bike shop and they had it back to me within a couple of hours. With everything in alignment, I went ahead and reinstalled the stands valve, remounted the tire, removed the valve core, and re-added sealant. Then, instead of a floor pump, I used my compressor, outfitted with a brand new Presta-Cycle press-deflator, to quickly seat the bead against the rim. Finally, I followed the same process as the front, where I identified bubbles, rolled sealant around to concentrate it in areas where leaks occurred, and then laid the tire flat on each side for a couple of hours while the sealant set up. Alright, now both my front and rear tires are set up tubeless. I think the Gravelking SKs look great just sitting still here, so I'm definitely looking forward to taking them out soon for their first ride. As mentioned at the beginning, we can see there's definitely a lot more work involved with the process compared to setting up traditional inner tubes, which often includes using creativity to solve unique problems. And the problems you experience, as well as their solutions, can be different for every pair of tubeless tires you set up. But in the end, I think the better puncture resistance and improved ride quality more than make up for the extra elbow grease needed at the beginning. Be sure to sign up for notifications as we release more how-to videos, as well as check out our news, reviews, and guides on treadbikely.com.